Your arrival in St. Petersburg Airport is quite similar to landing in any other big city airport any place in the world. Well, in our case, we're arriving as a group from Hawaii, and our bus is waiting for us. Now, this is pretty odd because we're arriving close to midnight, and yet there's still light in the sky. We're traveling during the month of July, and at that time of year, they have what they call the white nights, where it hardly ever gets dark during the 24 hours. You'll notice the new terminal building, and next to it, the older Soviet-style architecture of the original airport terminal building from the 1940s. There is lots of new construction happening in St. Petersburg today, with all of that oil money that's flowing in. Our guide and escort, Olga, tells us about some of these developments.
So you have landed at Pulkovo International Airport of St. Petersburg. This is quite a new facility. And Dennis has noticed that a lot has changed. This is growing very, very rapidly. Actually, this is the result of the oil money, which is coming to Russia in abundance due to the very unexpected rise in oil prices, which surpassed the expectations of the budget planners of the government. Because of that, Moscow, which received the first portion of that huge investment, can no longer digest that money. They have received so much that everybody is driving the Mercedes and Volvos and BMW, and they are not driving, but they are staying in the traffic jams. Of course, the whole lifestyle is changing rapidly, and as part of that is the prices grow dramatically.
As we get closer to the city, the spectacular monuments start to appear, such as this triumphal arch in the middle of the road.
To commemorate the victory of Russia in the Russo-Turkish campaign. It looks very picturesque now in this light. Your tour of St. Petersburg will be taking place. Your tour guide will be Vera, so this is the team helping you in St. Petersburg. Mostly that will be the tour of the most picturesque sites of the city with photography stops, and Vera will be showing you everything around. You will have some time for walking around and visit some of the most beautiful streets of St. Petersburg. And one of your stops will be at the world-famous ballet school of Russia, the Vaganova Ballet Academy. We have received their kind approval of that, and you will be able to see the museum of the Ballet Academy, where they exhibit the relics, the belongings of famous ballet dancers of Russia.
Well, now we're going to show you some various highlights of our visit to St. Petersburg. One of the things that we like to do is visit the palaces, of course. Our bus takes us right there, and our guide brings us through. Maybe you'll be entertained by some music as you enter the palace grounds. These fellows perform for free, but they'd appreciate any tips, or you can buy their CDs. Some of the various sites we're going to be showing you as you visit St. Petersburg. There's a lot of palaces lining the many canals of this city, and we're going to bring you on a boat ride. That's one of your highlights of a visit to St. Petersburg, certainly. Just takes about 1 hour for the boat ride. It's really a pleasant experience to relax on your boat and watch these former palaces and deluxe apartments gliding by. And don't worry about getting seasick. It's all very calm here in the canals. Now we'll give you a quick taste of one of the fine palaces. This is Catherine Palace, just on the outskirts of the city. And this makes a real highlight of your visit to St. Petersburg. The Amber Room has been recently restored, and you'll see a lot of the interior dining rooms and gathering rooms, the ballrooms, and we're going to walk through it with our local guide Vera, who is going to tell us all about it, coming up a little bit later in the program. The gardens of Catherine Palace are even more beautiful than the interior. You've got the floral plantings, the pavilions, wonderful statues and fountains out in the gardens. St. Petersburg is a huge city of 5 million people, but they do have a nice amount of green space in the city. We'll be driving around town. Here's a statue of Lenin, one of the rare relics from the communist days. Take you down the main Nevsky Prospect, the most important and busiest shopping street in town. There's a lot of department stores, boutiques, and cafes along Nevsky. We'll bring you inside their big shopping mall. It's just like a modern Western store. Russia has really come a long way in the last 5 or 10 years. And look at this deluxe hotel. And they often have live music provided by a harpist or other kinds of solo instrumentalists here. Russia has really gotten upscale in many ways. It's really the finest hotel in St. Petersburg with sky-high prices to match. If you can afford $500 per night in the summer rates, this would be an ultimate indulgence for your home base while in town. Take a look at Art Square. This is just by the Grand Hotel Europe. Statue of Pushkin in the middle, another statue here of Peter the Great over at Decembrist Square. And yes, we will have some fine meals and show you where you can enjoy gourmet food while you're visiting in St. Petersburg. This is just across the street from the Grand Hotel Europe. The restaurant is actually a branch of the hotel. And there's plenty of gift shops nearby in this same central neighborhood as well. You've got to look for that souvenir trophy to take home. And by all means, go to the ballet in the evening. You'll find music everywhere in St. Petersburg. It's such a classical city. Now we're showing you a quick preview of Peter's Palace. This is Peterhof, and it's got the Grand Cascade, this golden series of statues on the staircase. A real photogenic backdrop for us. And lovely gardens to walk around in, also called Petrovorets. And of course, perhaps the main highlight of a visit to St. Petersburg is the Hermitage Museum. This is one of the top 5 art museums in the world, certainly. Some might consider it the best and the biggest. It has a great collection of European old masters and beautiful interior architecture. We'll take you through it with our guide, Vera. We're starting out our first big day of touring with a trip to Catherine Palace.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to St. Petersburg. Welcome to Russia. So again, my name is Vera. I'll be your tour guide for this 3-day program. We start our program from summer residence, which is called Catherine's Palace. In blue and white, that's Catherine's Palace. We are on the way there.
Catherine Palace, one of the most beautiful of all Russia's royal homes, and it's about an hour's drive outside of town. This stunning place was created by Peter the Great's daughter, Tsarina Elizabeth I, who commissioned her favorite architect, Rastrelli. The palace is named after her mother, Catherine I, who died 30 years before the palace was begun in the mid-18th century. Elizabeth also died before the palace was completed, so she never did get to live in her new home. Catherine Palace was later expanded by Catherine the Great into the magnificent structure that we see today, helped by the innovative designs of Charles Cameron, a Scot with no previous building experience. And yet he learned a lot. He had a natural talent for architecture and design. While she had many palaces to choose from, this became the favorite residence of Catherine the Great. Built over 2 generations, the palace displays a dramatic mix of Baroque and neoclassical styles. The facade is nearly 1,000 feet long, featuring many muscular statues of Atlas, whose massive shoulders hold up the windows, doors, and roofline, flanked by dozens of pilasters and 200 types of stucco ornamentation that complete this amazing architectural scene. Painted bright blue and white with golden accents, it is an immense ensemble that matches the grandeur of the sky above. When constructed, this was the longest building in the world, but it is only 1 room deep. Inside this museum, there are 20 rooms restored to their original appearance, as well as exhibition galleries with informative historical displays. The most impressive room is the Great Hall. The room is long and narrow, but gives a feeling of wide spaces because of the illusion created by all the windows and mirrors, while the painted sky in the ceiling adds a sensation of more space to this ballroom. An elaborate mosaic floor of precious woods arranged in geometric patterns enhances the effect. It was lit at night by 700 candles in elaborate chandeliers. Hundreds of unique Rococo wood carvings on the walls of birds and flowers, with no 2 images looking alike, extend the space even further. By the way, a note on the Rococo versus Baroque. Key differences are the Rococo was even more elaborate, came a little bit later in time, more florid, more detailed, and in particular, it's asymmetric. The design on one half is different than the design on the other side, whereas Baroque tends to be more symmetric. Meals were served non-stop in this lavish home, which conveniently had 30 dining rooms, serviced by a small army of butlers, cooks, footmen, and maids. It is said, for example, that Catherine the Great drank 50 cups of coffee every day, which was at that time an extremely rare and expensive brew. The Russian aristocracy did not practice much self-control, enjoying a lavish lifestyle we see reflected in these opulent surroundings. The rooms continue with exhibitions of furniture, ceramics, musical instruments, and decorative arts from Turkey and Japan. Perhaps the most famous feature of the palace is the Amber Room, whose walls were completely covered in carefully carved panels of amber, which is a fossilized tree sap. But these panels were stolen by the Russians during the last war. International negotiations are continuing to find and then return these precious items in return for some impressionist paintings that the raiding Russians stole from the Germans. And meanwhile, Russian craftsmen have completed a recreation of the original panels using that precious natural amber, which is also quite popular for the local jewelry throughout the region. In one large picture gallery, the walls are completely covered from floor to ceiling with paintings by rather obscure 18th century French and Italian artists. When you finish the palace visit, then you can have an ice cream or a sandwich or a bowl of soup at the slightly expensive snack shop while recharging your batteries. Then we took a walk with our guide Vera, who told us more about the history of the palace.
It took about 10 years to build it. About 300 servants worked here. We saw only the staterooms. There were private rooms, bedrooms and studies on the first floor, but later they were not restored during the time of Soviet period after the war. They thought it was not that important to show bedrooms and studies. Also, they didn't have a wish to show private side of life of Zaz. It was governmental measure. They were interested in showing the most beautiful rooms, showing that Zaz lived in luxury, as well as the rest of the country was poor. For up to 1861, it was serfdom in Russia. And this palace was built very quickly because they had lots of very, very cheap labor. Many people worked here just for food.
There's a lot more to see in the extensive royal gardens. There's little duck ponds, rolling lawns, manicured bushes, surprised gazebos, and scattered statues, all connected by comfortable gravel pathways. There are no fountains on the scale of Peterhof, so you must visit both palaces to experience the complete package of interior and exterior delights. There are some bathhouses for steam soaking. There are some summer pavilions where the royalty and their friends would take their afternoon tea.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the so-called agate pavilion. The rooms inside are decorated with jasper and agate, which is striped stone, also from Ural Mountains. The facade was decorated in the Pompeian style. Pompeian style, that's usually bright color contrasts like bright yellow, white and terracotta, and usage of natural stone. It was designed by Charles Cameron for Catherine the Great. So let's walk through the gardens a little. This yellow building is Bath Pavilion. So Bath was separate. They wouldn't go to Bath every morning like we do now. Of course, here was some shortage of water, like all over Europe. Let's walk over there first to take a picture of the palace facade. Then we'll see English Garden of Catherine, and then walk around and come out that way.
You can get a nice garden view looking back at the palace, which is so huge that you need to get far away to take it all in. Well, as you walk through the garden, you'll notice a large structure, a pavilion, up on a hill with Greek columns in the front looking something like the Parthenon. This was a party pavilion that was also designed by Charles Cameron. There's even a semblance of a little miniature village of little pseudo boathouses to the delight of the aristocracy as part of their garden, which also has some fake ruins and various column structures and beautiful floral plantings throughout.
There is an island and a pavilion on an island there. So that's called Admiralty Pavilion. Just decorative pavilion, also used for private parties, just to make landscape more interesting and beautiful. It reminds Admiralty Shipbuilding Yard in St. Petersburg. This is Grotto Pavilion. It's also designed by Rastrelli. It's the same style as the palace. There they could enjoy some fresh air, also to have a drink and sunbathe in front of it in nice sunny weather. And then all the servants would bring food and everything and drinks and then leave. There Catherine with friends could be really private. For servants that time meant extra ears. Now we're going in the direction of the so-called private gardens.
So even the gardens of Catherine Palace are wonderful to see. Now we're heading back into town and we're going to go on a boat ride. Notice the tour boat service that offers water taxi canal rides. The standard 1-hour boat tour through the canals and rivers of St. Petersburg is an excellent experience. That's one of your highlights of a visit to St. Petersburg, certainly. You can catch these tour boats in front of Decembrist Square by that statue of Peter the Great on horseback near St. Isaac's Cathedral. You can check the schedule and prices and compare with various boat operations along Nevsky Prospect by the Anichkov Bridge. Already you start to see historic sites such as the Fortress of Peter and Paul in the distance with that church spire. That high needle spire is the highest point in St. Petersburg. This is the location of the earliest fortifications in the founding of the city. And across the river is the Museum of Curiosities, which was the very first museum set up in St. Petersburg by Peter. And now we're crossing along in front of the Hermitage Museum. It was formerly a palace of Catherine the Great, and now it is one of the finest art museums in the world. We'll be taking you in there during our visit to St. Petersburg. We're planning to visit in 2 half-day experiences rather than trying to cover the entire museum in one day. They've got 400 individual galleries, one of the two largest art museums in the world, along with the Louvre in Paris, and ultra-high quality. The interior is as beautiful as the paintings. The architecture, the paintings on the ceilings, the stucco on the walls, just makes a wonderful ensemble for your eyes. It was the palace, of course, of the royalty. Hermitage means a place of hermits dwelling, but it was hardly a hermit's dwelling. It was a very sociable place in those days. There's also a small ballet theater. We'll show you some of that dance performance in a little while. And the boat continues along, and now we're passing by our hotel. This is the Hotel St. Petersburg, which is one of the larger hotels in town, a very comfortable place to stay. As we turn away from the main river and into one of the side canals and begin our journey through the wonderful canals of St. Petersburg. There's a lot of palaces lining the many canals of this city, and just takes about 1 hour for the boat ride. It's really a pleasant experience to relax on your boat and watch these former palaces and deluxe apartments gliding by. And don't worry about getting seasick. It's all very calm here in the canals. And while we're riding along enjoying this scenic splendor, it's a good time to reflect on the history of St. Petersburg. Well, St. Petersburg began with Peter the Great, who founded the city in 1703, basing it on the great capitals of Europe. He was particularly enamored with cities such as Amsterdam that he visited in his travels in his youth, and wanted to create a new great European city from scratch, in the mud. He chose this strategic location where the Neva River joins the Gulf of Finland as the perfect place to build his navy and launch attacks on his enemies to the north. Peter was determined to catapult Russia from the Dark Ages straight into modern times in a single generation, and he succeeded. Architects and artisans were imported from Western Europe and put to work constructing a glorious new city on what had been empty, swampy, muddy islands. It was the only European capital to be built from scratch on a previously empty patch of land, following a rational plan. When construction began in this mud pit, there were no stones available locally for construction, so the builders came up with an ingenious solution, a stone tax, which required everyone coming into the city to bring a rock. If you were walking, only one rock was required. But if you came by horse, you needed 10 rocks, and if by barge, 100 rocks, just like paying a toll on our modern highways. All other stone construction was forbidden throughout the entire nation to focus efforts on St. Petersburg. The plan worked beautifully, and the city was built. You see how pleasant the boat ride can be on a beautiful day like this, with lovely weather and some light refreshments served on board. Ending our boat ride passing the historic battleship Aurora, where the first shots of the Russian Revolution were fired.